Good afternoon. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. My name is Tyrone. Today we're going to talk about a really interesting subject, especially what is going on right now as we are in the holiday season. A lot of times people get together with their families and we do a lot of things with our families, and we're also, getting ready for Christmas and getting Christmas gifts for our kids or loved ones. But there is also a dark thing that I feel like we need to talk about, and that's learning how to cope as people. And the reason why I'm glad I'm talking about this right now is because a lot of times people during this season are depressed for a lot of reasons, whether it be they're not with their family, they're not working right now, or there's so many things. Because this is the happiest time of the year, but for some, this is the darkest time of the year, especially if you lost a mother or father, you lost your grandparents, and we have ways of coping. A lot of us, some is positive, but a lot of times it's negative when we're talking about drugs, alcohol, sex. And one of the things that we don't talk about, and why I am very thoughtful to talk about this, is because something that I'm still dealing with myself, and I'm not an expert on this, and all these other things that I'm talking about, I am not experts on. So take that with a grain of salt, but I'm just going to talk about why it's important that we do take the steps to figure out what is wrong with us and how to cope. Because, like I said, a lot of times during the holiday season, people kill themselves or they find ways and negative ways to deal with things that are hurtful or hurtful to them mentally, such as, like I said, not being around family, or having a certain loved one, not being around kids, not being in a stressful financial situation, trying to make rent and giving your kids, a great Christmas. And one of the things that I want to talk about is just the stigma of going to a psychologist. And I'm just going to talk about it from my perspective. I'm going to talk about my life, and I'm going to talk about why I chose to go to see a psychologist. And I'm just going to say this for any family members who are listening. Yes, I will be talking about certain things that has happened in my life. I'm not going to name names, but if you know who you are and this offends you, I apologize. But I feel like this needs to be said, but I'm not going to mention nobody's name if I do say something negative about anybody. And if you want to talk about it further, that's fine. But that's just that disclaimer out there. But the reason why I decided to go to see a psychologist back in the year of 2017, even though I did go see a psychologist, which I will talk about later, in around like 2012, 2013. But the reason why I went to go see a psychologist in 2017 was due to the fact that I had so much going for myself, but I was so lost with myself. I did not love myself. I never understood myself. And quite frankly, I hated myself. And a lot of times people would say, well, Tyrone, man, you got a lot of stuff going for you, man. You always happy. You always making us laugh. But deep down, I was in a dark place. Deep down, I was in a really dark place, and I didn't know anything that could really help me. So let's start to the year that I was born. I was born in 1993. I'm from Southwest Atlanta. I hail from the area of Kelmison Road. That's where I'm from Southwest Atlanta. And during my childhood, like I said, I had a really good childhood up until around the age of 11, but which I will talk about in a second. But during that time, I have an older sister, but she was older. I mean, by the time I got to 5, she already moved out the house. So I never really felt like I had, I have a sibling, but I never felt like I really had one. I felt like the only child because of the simple fact that my sister was gone out the house by the time that I started remembering who I was. So at that point, my mom was a single parent, and she did the best she could. And I had fun. Like, my childhood was one of the best childhoods I can remember. Like, I'm one of the few kids to say that they've been on an airplane, and that can say that they went to Disney World and life was really good. Um, and I never had an identity crisis at that point because I knew who I was. Like, I was somewhat popular I stayed in Centralville Apartments off of Centralville Drive on the corner of Centralville and Camden Road. So I stayed there. We stayed there for 10 years. I went to the same elementary school, Phoenician Hills Elementary, which is not closed. I pretty much had a singular life. Everything was the same. My mom. We didn't move. Had the same bedroom, had the same friends, had the same day to day basis. Meaning, I went to school. My mom worked, and she worked every other day. She was part time, so she would work one day, and then she would be off the next because she worked at the hospital. She worked at a hospital, and at that point, life was really good. Like, I felt like I knew we wasn't wealthy, but I knew my mom had decent money because, you know, I, as a kid, knew what being a vanity slave was, meaning that I knew that because I wore Nikes and I wore nice clothes and I was never really looking dinky or crummy or anything like that, I felt good about myself. And I knew that people who wore certain type of apparel or brands, whatever, they were deemed not popular. So I felt really good about myself because I used to wear name brand stuff a lot thanks to my grandparents. So we go from that. I'm thinking life, it's like the honeymoon phase of life for me. Everything was just awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Like, there was nothing wrong with me. And that's why, if anybody knows me, I always talk about how much I love Kelton Road because Kelton Road is synonymous with the good times in my life. No matter how much times I got in trouble in school or anything, Kelton Road was the good time of my life. And also during this time of this point in my life was the fact that I was around my grandparents and specifically my granddad on my dad's side because my granddad would come pick me up, take me to church, and I think I talked about him in my last podcast that I did with my wife. But like I said, he did a lot for me, and I I could never not imagine having a better grandparent than my granddad. Like, he was A1 to me, and during those times I would either go to his house or I go to Monk Eric's house and be with my cousins, and that was just amazing as well. So I, for one, am just that was like the best time period. So what I'm getting to is, in life, there's always going to be a roadblock that interferes. And my mom lost her job back in she she lost her job back in, I want to say, like 2003. I didn't know anything about unemployment. I didn't know anything about being fired because my mom had a job her entire, up until that point. And you know, I didn't, as an adult now who pays rent and pays bills, I can only imagine what my mom went through during that time. And I do want to apologize, as I'm not sick, but I got the sniffies and I've been coughing a lot, sneezing a lot today. I don't have COVID, but yeah. So if I do sneeze, I do apologize for that. I'm just gonna work through this. But like I was saying, my mom lost her job, and you know, I can understand what she went through now because as a rent payer and somebody who pays bills, I can only imagine what it was like for her to have to struggle paying bills when you don't even have a job and unemployment runs out. And it was election day 2004. We got evicted, and I'll never forget that day. I came home from school as normal. Um, we had a next door neighbor. Her son was helping my mom move, and I'll never forget. Were we had caught the bus, and we had put we already moved anyway. Like, we put our stuff in public storage. But the rest of the stuff we had to carry in trash bags because we didn't have, a lot of stuff to carry. And I'll never forget, we was caught the 83, which is the bus that goes by Kelton Road. And I'll never forget, we went to a Waffle House that's ironically around the corner from where I stay at right now. And that was the end of my chapter staying in Centralville Apartments. And life happened. I had to learn how to, because one of my strong suits that I have now as an adult is learning how to adjust to any environment. And this is where it started. Because I went from having an apartment, having my own room, having my own TV, having video game systems, to now trying to figure out, understanding, okay, now I don't have all this, and this is my new life right now. So at that point, we moved in with a family member for a short period of time, and I kept thinking this is going to be okay. But we moved into this homeless shelter named My Sister's House, which is in Atlanta and still open to this day, off of High Mill Road. And this is a shelter for women and children up to a certain age if you were a boy. And I barely qualified because I was 11 at that time, and the cutoff age I think was 13. And when I tell you, that's when the honeymoon phase was over. And I know I'm talking about depression and why I feel like we need to learn how to cope, but trust me, just stick with me on here. This is going to be a little lengthy episode, but I feel like this is worth it. But the reason why my life turned upside down, because I had a time limit when I was supposed to go to sleep, but my mom was not that strict, so, and I like going to sleep early anyway, so I used to go to, I could control when I go to sleep. In this shelter, they controlled every aspect of your life, which is something I do want to talk about in another podcast, about how we are treated in society when we are in different situations. But it felt like prison. So I'll never forget the day that we got into the shelter. I got taken out of school early. And everybody likes that when they call your name over the intercom and they say, come, they buzz in the room and they say, hey, such and such, please come to the office for checkout. That was like the best feeling in the world when you was as a kid and going to school. So that happened, and I'll never forget, we went to 5 Points train station, which is the big train station in Atlanta. It's like Grand Central Station in New York, or the Union Station in DC, or the South Station in Boston. Anyway, we went to 5 Points. We went to Popeyes. I'll never forget. Believe they had crawfish at that time, and I had got some crawfish. So, moving on with the story, we get on the bus and we go to this homeless shelter. And I thought it was gonna be okay. I didn't know what to really expect, but shit went down here real quick. And my mom did the best she could, in those circumstances. But just imagine you're going, when most of the time when you go off to college or you go to the military or you go move, to a new place, it's a great experience, but this experience was horrible. I'll never forget, we got checked in and we found our bed and everything, and I didn't even have a pillow. So I went to the office and didn't have a pillow. I was forced to use towels as a pillow. And this is when my life started to get really fucking shitty. No pun intended. Because at that point, one of the things that I do not fucking like is taking a shit or doing a number 2 in public. That's one of the things I hate to do. I gotten better with it now, but I rarely do it if I have to. Sorry for being gross. But so just imagine you taking a shower in public, like community showers. You're using a restroom like as if you're going to Lenox Mall, right? And then on top of that, I got really sick. I was really sick. For like 2 periods of times I got really sick, and during that time, I was in 5th grade when this was going on, and during that time, I was literally shitting on myself. Not because I didn't want to use the restroom, But I was so sick that I literally was shitting on myself every fucking day. And it was embarrassing. Like, it was, I don't know if anybody who listens to me knows about me, who still follows me, like when I went to Phoenician Hills, but there I was legit shitting on my fucking self. Nobody knows this. And I couldn't think about it while I was doing this, but I could see why I did, because there was so much emotional term. It's like your face basically, in a sense, trying to understand your new life, because I've been so conditioned to living a certain way for 11 years, and eventually, it slowed down, but it kept coming back and forth. But the other thing that really bothered me to this day, along with the issue that I've had, was the fact that we had to go to church service every day at this homeless shelter. No matter no matter what day, because like I said, they control every aspect of your life. You had to wake up at a certain time. You had to go to breakfast at a certain time. You had to leave at a certain time. You had to come back at a certain time. You had to eat dinner at a certain time. You had to go to sleep at a certain time. This was every day, no matter if it was Saturday or Monday. Every day, they control every aspect of your life. So at that point, one of the requirements was, I believe after you ate dinner, you had to go to service in their chapel, because they're a faith-based organization. And while I understand the motives and everything that came with it, I used to hate going to services, and I hate to this day worship music, because it reminds me of the bondage that I was at in that point in my life. I know for some people, worship music is really good for them and it helps them get through things. It's the exact opposite for me, because music is one of the things that I can listen to and it takes me back to a place. Like, for example, early 2000s R&B and rap music is probably my favorite subgenre, besides like 90s R&B and hip hop, because second favorite, because of it reminds me of living on Kempton Road. Like, if I hear any old Ashanti song or Ja Rule or, early T.I. music, it takes me back. Like, prime example, and I'm going to keep moving. Urban Legends album came out in the same year that all this was going on. So every time I listen to that album, that's ironically my favorite album by T.I., I think about being homeless, because I remember listening to that music in that time period, going to Phoenician Hills and doing that, because I was in the 5th grade when all this was going on. So, because I got cut back. So yeah, I was in the 5th grade. So going back to what I was talking about, the reason why I do not like worship music, because it reminds me of bondage, and every day I had to go through this and hear this, and it really, as an 11 years old, you don't really think about mental baggage that you have or mental bondage, but I really learned how to numb myself of mental hurt because of the things that I went through to this day. And I never expressed that, but it took a toll on me emotionally. So because you only stay in these homeless shelters for a month, we moved back in with another relative, and it was not good, to say the least, for a lot of reasons. For me personally, because like I said, I'm used to living a certain type of life, and this was the first time in an extended period of time staying with family members. And I don't care what nobody say, you cannot stay with family unless you're that's your mom, because at the end of the day, people are accustomed to living a certain way without you. So when you come into their household, you disrupt that flow, because now you have lived a certain way, and now you're coming to that house and you're taking away from things, and it didn't go well. And then we moved into another family member house for like a week, and that was around New Year's Eve, and that was a little rocky. And I'll never forget, it was New Year's Eve 2004. My mom had to go and get which was then a MARTA card at DFAX, which is which is on the other side. And the highlight of that was the fact that we celebrated New Year's Eve on the train, and it was a sense of normalcy because MARTA was a place where I can escape. As crazy that was, because during those times, like we was definitely on MARTA, bouncing forth and around, and I was living in Clayton County, but I was staying in Clayton County at that time. But then I was going to school in Fulton County. In Atlanta, I was going to Atlanta Public Schools. So at that time, it was crazy. And then I was already out of school, so I had to worry about going from the east side of Atlanta all the way to the west, like southwest Atlanta, just to go to school, which is another thing that I had to go through. So after that, we stayed in this homeless shelter called the Nicholas House, which is a transitional housing. I still believe they're open to this day too, off in East Atlanta, by the Zoo Atlanta or the Grant Park. And I got sick again, and this time I was able to control my bowels, but I was having like the worst stomach viruses ever. I don't know what I had, but I couldn't even eat, and I don't believe that it was because of something that was physical. I believe everything was going on was mental. And like I said, during this time, I was still going to school, and it was so bad that I'd be sick in school, and they'll literally ask my mom, well, are you gonna take him home? And then she was like, we don't have a home to go to. There's no way that can happen. And that was the truth. Like, I would legit go to school with a stomach virus, which is very dangerous to do because you can get other people sick. But yes, I was going to school with a stomach virus. And eventually it went away. And I was able to get better. By the time we moved out, it was the end of the school year. It was May. And then we moved in with another relative who's now deceased. And we then moved in with another relative again. And then by that time, December, around like the November 2005, we got our apartment back. We moved into some apartments in East Point. So during that year, it was really just a year and a couple of months or a couple of days, because it was from November 2004 to November of 2005 when we got our apartment. But in between that time, I went through a lot of personal shit that I was never equipped to deal with. And this is what I'm going to talk about later. Because like I said, I had to go to a psychologist and find out what was wrong with me. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm in middle school, by the way, and this is nothing I can't really fast forward. I was bullied to a certain extent, and I was bullied because I was small, I was ugly to people, I got called crackheads, I got called all types of shit, to the point to this day that I don't even know if I'm how really good looking I am, because I've grown accustomed to hearing that I was ugly and I look like a crackhead and nobody wants me and you just ugly as shit. Like, just random people walk by and just say, oh, that nigga ugly as hell, and just laugh. And I had to learn how to grow and just deal with it. And there were situations where, because like during this time period before we got the apartment, I love Young Jeezy's music. So during that time, I can name the middle school that I was going to. I went to Sylvan Hills Middle School for like 2 months. And Sylvan Hills at that time was one of the most dangerous middle schools to go to. At that time, like you went through metal detectors to go to school. You couldn't have lockers. It was a notorious middle school. Them and Brown Middle School at that time, and Price, 3 middle schools, all in a situation which all 3 I think used to be high schools. So yes, Sylvan Hills Middle School is notorious. So because I was able to kind of skate by, ironically I got kicked out of Sylvan because I got into a fight, and they found out that I did not live in the district, because at that point we already moved to East Point with staying with another relative before we got our apartment in East Point. So I didn't go to Camp Creek Middle School where I thought shit was sweet. Like I thought nobody could touch me because shit, I just came from the worst, one of the baddest middle schools in Atlanta, and shit, I just beat this nigga ass, at Sylvan. I got suspended, but it was cool because like I got kicked out. And ironically, the only reason I went to Sylvan is because I thought I was gonna be going with people I know. That didn't happen. But I still had my issues at Sylvan too. So I go to Camp Creek and I was in a huge situation where I was playing myself. And it took me a while to realize that I was playing myself. So at that point, mind you, Sylvan is one of the worst middle schools in the time in Atlanta. I go to Camp Creek, I learn about Bloods, Crips, Gangster Disciples, Vice Lords, Land Kings, all that. I came from, and this is a better school because this is more in the suburbs. Camp Creek Middle School versus Sylvan, which is more of a working class inner city neighborhood. But I learned about gang culture going to Camp Creek Middle School. And I tried a lot of people. I ended up getting kept back this year because I've been kept back 2 times. And this was the second time because I did not give a fuck. I used to skip school. I did not give a fuck about life. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about nothing. And I think the reason why I did not give a fuck is because what I was just talking about previously. I did not give a fuck about anything. Skipping school, not a problem. And during this time was the time that I was starting to lose my granddad. And I'm not crying, like I said, I'm just having like some whatever going on. But this was the time. So this is in between. Okay, so I got kept back. So this is in between going back to school again, this time as a 6th grader. And things were different. I thought that life was going to go back to normal once we got our apartments. But it didn't. And it was even to the point of that I was embarrassed that I did not get a new pair of shoes. Normally when you go back to school, especially if you black, so when you go back to school, you got to have a new pair of shoes. That's minimum requirement. Because if you don't go to school with a new pair of shoes, you're going to get clowned. You're going to get John Dome. That's just automatic. And I did not have a new pair of shoes. And because of that, I skipped the first 4 days of school when I went back to Camp Creek as a repeat 6th grader. To the point where the social worker had to basically call my mom and tell me that I was not going to school. So I had to go back to school. And they, like I said, oh, he ain't got no new pair of shoes. And that's yeah. And it was embarrassing. But during that time, that was like my granddad's last, like August, it's going into September. That was his last couple months living. And at that point, because my granddad was very close to me, I spent like spring break with him the earlier year with him, and that was, I want to believe, the last real time I spent time with him that I can remember, other than giving him calls and stuff like that. But he was dying, and during that time, like I said, I was not giving a fuck about anything. Like I just like I said, like basically I just was not giving a fuck about nothing. I wasn't taking showers. I did not give a fuck about life at that point. And we went, it was me, my sister, her kids, my mom. We went there. And my granddad had asked me, he was definitely ill at this point because he could barely function. He was weak. And like I said, this is something very traumatic to me. And he had asked me how I was doing in school. And I said, I lied and said, I'm doing good. And my sister was like, no, he's skipping school. And I'm not going to sit up and lie. I was mad about it for years, about that. But ironically, I'm not mad at it no more. I'm actually thankful that she actually did that, because it lit a fire under me to not disappoint my granddad ever again. And it took a while for me to get my shit together. But to look my granddad in the eyes, he could barely shake my hand, and to look and to know what type of impact he did for me, and to disappoint him was like the biggest fuck up in my life. One of the biggest fuck ups, because I've never been to prison, nothing like that. But for me, that was one of the biggest fuck ups I ever did in my fucking life. And I owed it to him and to myself not to be in that position again. And unfortunately, I never got the chance to shake my granddad's head again because he died. And I think I talked about this in my last podcast, but I had one opportunity to see him again. And as you know, I don't know if I ever talked about this, but because by the way, I'm going to have a sports podcast dropping. I got an episode dropping tomorrow. But anyway, I'm a huge Falcons fan. This was when Vic was still playing with the Falcons. And I'll never forget the game. It was week 2 in the NFL. Falcons versus Buccaneers at the Georgia Dome. We ended up winning that game 17-10. And my mom asked me, did I want to go see my granddad? And I said, no. I'm going to see him another time. I want to watch this Falcons game. And I never got a chance to see him again. And the next time I saw him was when they closed the casket on him. And I never got to say my goodbyes to my granddad. I never got the opportunity to say thank you for being a great grandparent. Thank you for being the best male role model I've ever had in my life. Thank you for all those times that you did everything for me. I never got the opportunity to say that because he died. And I was selfishly putting the Falcons' interest over seeing my granddad. And my mom always tells me that at the end of the day, he was barely there, but I still didn't get the chance to say that to him. So he died in 2006. I made that promise, but I still wasn't giving a fuck. I was still skipping school. I was still just being an a-hole. They pushed me to 7th grade. I was still skipping school, but I went to a different school, and while I was skipping school, I had to meet with the social worker of Woodland Middle School. I believe that was, Miss Dr. Flournoy. And the biggest mistakes that I was making in my life turned out to be the most impactful thing that could ever happen to me, because him and another person named Doctor, I think he's a doctor. Don't feel offended. Dr. Granger. They had this program called My Brother's Keeper at Woodland Middle School, and my mom put me in that program, and I couldn't skip school at that point because obviously if I skipped days, they would know. And I still skip a couple of days here and there, but they would know that, hey, you skipping school and you in my program. Like, how the hell are you doing this? They would have held me accountable. And because I liked being in My Brother's Keeper. And there was a situation, one of the reasons why I did not like going to school, because like I said, I had a bully who used to fuck my life up. Like, control, like, everybody got that one for the most part. Some people don't, but some people do. And I had that one. And I found out that he got into a fight with somebody else, and they sent him to alternative school. And once that happened, my life changed just like that, to the point where I felt more comfortable going to school. But I still was not happy with my life because of all the things that I went through. And I continued to go to school. I got better with grades, and everything started to turn around. 8th grade, I became better. I still was struggling and straggling behind and not doing my work as I should, but I was able to pass the majority of my classes. And I did have to go to summer school because I've been to summer school pretty much all my schools, but it was due to the fact that I failed the math portion of the TRCT, but I passed all my classes. And I'm a great test taker because that's always been something I'm good at. I got honorary on 2 of my CRCT scores, which was crazy, which was history and language arts, or well, social studies and language arts. And I to this day do not know if I passed my CRCT. They just put me in the ninth grade. So I go to ninth grade. I decided that I'm gonna make at least a B average. I'm gonna come out with a 3.0. I'm gonna come out with a 3.0. Ninth grade year was really good. My mom lost her job in 2008. This is when I was in 8th grade, and we was going through the same situation that happened when I was in the 5th grade. Ironically, I was in the 5th grade when it happened. This was in the 8th grade. So ninth grade went by. And we were struggling to survive. Like, we didn't have no lights from April of 2010 to October because my mom was struggling with finances and we had to do what we had to do. But in that point, it was still some normalcy there because just because we didn't have lights, we still figured out shit. We kept moving. But then we finally got evicted for the second time in October of 2010. And this is when I was in 10th grade. And statistically, my worst year in high school was my 10th grade year. Go figure. I still did okay, but I was getting C's, and I failed 2 half classes because we took quarter, like, I don't even know how to explain it, but I failed like a half of a class, 2 half classes. 10th grade year, we move in with family, shit is not going well, to say the least. And then shit went left. I had to be on my own. And I literally was on my own from, I want to say, March of 2012 until I went to college, which was, and I was still on my own, but June of 2013. And it wasn't hard, but it was really the best thing that could have really ever happened to me because I grew the fuck up. I had to grow the fuck up. I had to learn how to do certain things, like, and there was situations that I had to be in quote unquote a bitch or a snitch or shit like that because of my living situation. Like, there was a situation where dude put a I don't know if people know about this, but they have a flame torch when you put like aerosol and you got like the little lighter and you spray the shit and it creates a fire. They did this to me. Now, my normal instinct is to get up and fight, but I had to really do a split, critical thinking decision. I do not have a place to stay. I could not go back because I was in this program called the Covenant House, and then I had to leave because of certain situation. I apologize for not including that part. So this is when I was in the second part. It was the second place, and I decided that I was going to say something about it. Why? Because I needed them out of my picture, but at the same time, I still need a place to stay. Because if I got into a fight, boom, I don't know where I'm going to stay at. I was barely 18 at this point to going on 19. Because like I said, I got kept back twice. This is junior year going into senior. So this is the summertime. And I had to do what I had to do. Not proud about it, but it worked out, as I'm about to explain. Because dude got gone. I was able to flourish. But then when I went back to the Covenant House, old dude was there. Now, he was only there for a day, and then he left. And I got called a snitch because I guess he told people what the hell was going on. So I was an outcast for like a couple of days. And I ain't say nothing to nobody. It was what it was. But the funny thing about life is, and this is just an aside, but the funny thing about life is, life has a quick way of showing you that you did the right thing, because that same dude who got mad, well, first of all, the dude who I snitched on, is currently locked up in prison right now for child molestation. That's one thing. The second thing is the fact that the dude who got mad because I did what I had to do, I don't know where he's at right now, But shit didn't work out for him. Me, I was able to get my apartment within like 26 days. Now, granted, I don't condone snitching. That's not something I'm just gonna normally do. But when the shit that happened was I was able to not have to worry about where I'm gonna lay my head at night for a whole fucking year. And I was able to have my own apartment, do my own thing, be my own man, take care of myself, and I became emancipated to the point where I was able to check myself out of school as an adult because I didn't have no guardian. I was my guardian. So, and this is where I want to get to, because one of the things that people like to think about is, oh, you kill people with success, man. You know, you do this and you do that. Because I had rocky relationship with family members, and I was told that when you graduate high school, man, you're going to stun on these people, man. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. And I did that. I graduated high school. Life was good. I was going to college. Everything was great. I felt like I was on top of the world. The same place, I was still in the Covenant House. I was an OG. People respected me. Everything. For whatever reason. But this began a new chapter in my life called going to college. Because I talked about all the things that have led up to this point. From being a kid, standing on Kalamazoo Road, to being in a homeless shelter, dealing with shitting on myself, to going to middle school, figuring out who I was at a certain point, going to high school, and going through that. Because high school was a breeze for me. Because I figured out who I was early. I knew I was a laid-back person. I don't like drama, but I defend myself. But most of the time, I'm just here to have fun. That's it. And do what I'm supposed to do. And I did not get my B average, but I came close to getting a B average. Because of those two classes that I failed, fucked my GPA up. But here, nonetheless, I go to Alabama State University. Never took a tour on the other school. Never been to Alabama before. Never been to Montgomery. Nonetheless, I never even heard of Alabama State until they interviewed me. Well, I got accepted. They came to our school. I did the free application. That's the only reason I applied, because it was a free application. I get into Alabama State, and I had to go to the summer because my grades was not good enough to get me enrolled regularly, so I had to be conditionally accepted. Their thing is, you go there, you take summer classes, you get accepted fully. So I do that. My first day there was another situation where I'm literally finding out what's going on. And basically, I go to the club because everybody knows when you go to HBCU, you always got to go to the club parties because that's the first thing they're gonna tell you about. I don't know how it is on every HBCU campus, but I talked to my wife and they used to have the same thing. They have like a party bus. They take you to the club. They take you back to your dorm. So I do that because I wanted to meet people, and it didn't go well. The next night was actually my birthday. I turned 20 years old. I'm a 20-year-old freshman because I got kept back twice. So I'm 20 years old and didn't really get a lot of feedback from nobody. Everybody told me, happy birthday or nothing like that. But I was riding solo dolo, at the end of the day. And I think I just wanted to genuinely feel love and find somebody who's going to make me feel special about myself. Because like I said, I felt ugly. Like I wouldn't, and this is the main reason why I talked to females, but I never took it past this friendship, the step of just being friends. Because once again, I felt ugly. And at that point, when I went to the club, it got so bad that I fell asleep in the club because I wasn't getting no play. I wasn't playing with nobody. I was a lame in a sense, and that's fine. So I knew at that point, going to the clubs wasn't for me. So I stayed in school. I got a little homesick. I came home for the 4th of July, went back to the Covenant House. That was fun. Went back to school. And then once the summer semester was over, I came back home. And then, I came back home, but I went back to the Covenant House. And then I went back to Alabama State, and that was the end of my chapter of being on my own because I left the Covenant House. They kicked me out for just being too good. So, or having a good place in life. So, or just being in the place that I need to be. So, I go back to Alabama State for fall semester, and I was not prepared mentally for it because I believe that when you go to college, you need a support system. And I felt like I did have a support system. Like I could call my cousin Darche, I could call my mom, but I felt like that was it. I didn't feel like I had nobody else because either I didn't try or nobody was trying to understand what was going on in college. And I learned that I was depressed. I'll never forget. I was supposed to go to, it was a Thursday. I had a public speaking and I had world history. I was taking world history and public speaking. And public speaking was my favorite class that I was taking. And I just had no energy to go to class this day at all. At all. And I sat in my bed. I missed 2 classes. I did not get out of the bed. I had the lights off because I had a roommate, but he was gone. And I just legit, I didn't cry, but I was depressed as hell. And I didn't know why I was depressed. I just was depressed. And it took me back to a place of just not giving a fuck about anything. Because the reason why I was going to college was because I wanted to do what I'm doing right now, which is radio and television. But I wanted to get into the aspect of having this as a career, like doing what I'm doing right now on this microphone right now. And I just didn't give a fuck. I did not care about anything. And, I skated by. I had decent grades my first semester. I learned how to drop a class. I dropped maybe 1 class. And then I got a D in another class. And then all my other classes I passed, which was some other shit. So, come back home. Well, Thanksgiving. First things first. Let me say this. Because I did move back here with my mom a little bit, but not fully because I had came back home, but I couldn't go back to the Covenant House. I went straight at my mom's house because one of my favorite people in the world, shout out to Anastasia West Daniels, she came down to go to Six Flags. Didn't tell nobody. I just saw that she was on. She had posted on Facebook that she was in Georgia, and I haven't seen her in 4 years at this point. So I'm like, what are you doing in Atlanta or coming to Atlanta? And she was like, she's going to Six Flags. So I spent my little money and I came up to see her, and I stayed with my mom, and that was like the first time. And then obviously I came back for Thanksgiving, but I was mostly at my cousin Darche's house for those days because my cousin Candace had came down, and I really know too much about her at that point. And me and her kind of hit it off, so I was at Darche's house for the majority of the time. And I was with my mom on the last day. I was with the first day and the last day. And I went back to school, finished out my semester, came back home. But there was a situation where I didn't know how I was going to go back to school because there's the financial aspect. And Alabama State is not the cheapest school to go to. So I was like, I don't know. And during that time, I was working at doing this little temp job stuff with this company called Labor, which I think they changed their name. But yeah, I was working for them, doing odd jobs just to have money in my pocket because I couldn't find no job. So it was cool. I was doing like sign holding, and some other little odd jobs. But I had the consistent job with sign holding. I'd do that, make me like, for like 4 hours, give me like $24. And that was a lot of money at that time for me because I wasn't making no money. So I do that. I go back to school, and because they gave me work study. And then I meet this girl. Well, I already knew this girl. And me and her became friends. And I thought, okay, cool. I'm gonna be all right. I go to Charlotte to see my cousin Candace. And after that, that's when the wheels just fucking break on my school. Like I just like fucked up every fucking thing. I failed my math class. I got a D in another class, and I got 2 C's in my other classes. And I was like, fuck school, man. I was just like, fuck it, because like school just wasn't it for me. And so I take a break. But meantime, I still feel like I am not where I want to be at in life, because at that point I was getting ready to turn 21, and I'm a male, and I'm still staying at my mom's house. So I do that. Fast forward a couple months, I go to AIU, do that. Still not enough. I get a certificate for them. It's not really doing anything for me. So I decided to go back to Alabama State in 2016. The same year I met my wife. And I do that in the summertime. And I was still a loner, because I forgot to mention that when I was going to Alabama State the first time, I didn't have a lot of friends because I was a loner. And I met a couple of people, and they were cool because I'm good in history. So they wanted to study under me. So I used that as leverage to basically beat people. And I'm done with that. And then I knew, and I told myself, I knew once I went home back in 2016 after the summer semester, that shit was on the left with just a lot of shit. And it did. And it got to a point where, I was bouncing around from house to house. I go either be at my cousin Erica's house, my friend Lee house, my mom's house. I go see my cousin Candace for a couple of days. And I wouldn't consider myself homeless, but I was homeless because I was bouncing from house to house. And during that time, I was already close, but I got really close to my granny, my grandmother on my side. We call her Granny. And I would help my cousin Erica, but then she started bouncing around as well. And she was going to Charleston, and she was here and she was there. But she was back in 2016. And essentially, that was my life. But I was working at Kroger. I was doing online classes at Alabama State in the fall of 2016. And I, once again, was miserable to the point where, because I was working a dead-end job, I was making $7.25 at Kroger. And where Kroger was, it wasn't on the bus line. So I either had to pay Uber, like $7 a trip, or I had to catch the bus and walk like 45 minutes to Kroger just to make $7.25, get treated like shit, and figure it out. So it was to the point where my phone got cut off. And that was that. I couldn't even afford to pay my phone bill. I was basically working just to make enough money just to get to work. And I will never forget, my cousin Anna, who I already mentioned, she was having her reception. And Kroger had me on the schedule to work Thanksgiving Day and Black Friday. And I was supposed to be in Charleston for her event. And I said, fuck it. Because I'm about to quit anyway. So I just said, fuck it. I go to Charleston. I go to Columbia to meet up with my cousin Candace. And I'm riding in Charleston with her. And I knew I was on my last days. And I'll never forget when I came back to Kroger, this lady who was my assistant manager, and she was my supervisor essentially, threw this box at me. And at that point, I was like, man, fuck you. And I stayed on for another week or two. I think it was 2 weeks. And then I'll never forget, the lady who threw the box at me, ironically, she was off for the entire week. And at that point, we was backed up, and my manager was talking about making me move because I wasn't really getting my job anyway. And it was like 6 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. like in the same month, like right now, December, and I quit. I walked off the job, and I'll never forget. I was in my Uber, and dude was playing Zoom by the Commodores, which is one of my favorite songs, and that was like me riding off into the sunset on Kroger in my life, and I was having like issues at home, so I decided that I needed to make a change because Alabama State, I didn't give a fuck about that either. And I decided that initially I was gonna go to Job Corps because I felt like Job Corps, I could stay there, they have housing, and I could get a trade, and that'll be the story of my life. And then I knew about this place called Year Up, Year like YEAR Up, because I had a friend who did really good with it, and she was coming out making money and changing her life. So I decided to sign up for Year Up, and that was that. And so 2017, which I believe is the most impactful year of my life, happened. I started Year Up, and it started off really fucking good with Year Up. Like I was really doing good, but my granny got sick, and it got to the point where she was in the hospital, and my time would be like this: Year Up during the morning, go to the hospital, go home, try to do my homework at the hospital because I didn't have time to do it at home because it was 8 or 9 o'clock, and go to school. There was days I didn't do my homework because one of the things that I learned from my granny, and I think honestly this is where it comes from, just talking to you guys about this right now, is the simple fact that I think I realized the reason why I care about my grandparents, and because I got another one that I got to talk about dying, is the fact that I never got the chance to say my goodbyes to my granddad. Subconsciously, I believe that's the main reason why I decided to go to the hospital with my granny day in, day out, because I did love her and I wanted her to know that I supported her, but I wanted her to know that, I loved her, and I was up there every fucking day. Well, not every day, but majority every other day. And another shitty situation happened where we had like a family dispute, and I never got to say goodbye to my granny, how I should have, because I was so frustrated with what was going on that I just walked out the room and I went home and I cried to my cousin Anna about the situation. And I already knew my granny didn't have much because they gave her a week to live. And my mom was with her. They had drove her to Charleston, South Carolina, where she's from. And she died on that Tuesday. And that broke me. Like I said, I was just going, but I didn't know how to function. I mean, I knew how to function because I've been so used to it, but I didn't know how to cope about the situation because this was just, this is what it is. And I go through that period. This was in February. We had the funeral in March. March happened. I am just existing at this point, to the point where I go to Year Up, I'm being negative, but I'm being funny at the same time, but I'm being negative. And they called me out for being negative, and I did not like that because I thought I was a super positive person. And I was really negative, and I was going through personal things with different people. And then I think my breaking point was just one day I go to Year Up, I just don't give a fuck about nothing. I'm just there, not participating in with any groups, because we had a lot of group activities, and I just was floating. Like I promise you, I was there, but I was not there because like I said, my whole motto is, I just don't give a fuck. So, at that point, this lady, her name is Miss Johnson. She worked at Europe, and I told her that I was depressed. And one of the things that Europe really does well is they give you resources to help you with whatever you got going on. And they set me up with a psychologist. I was like, okay, that's fine. I don't have no problems. I just don't give a fuck. And then I started talking to the psychologist, and then I started to realize that, you know what, I do have a fucking problem. Because what I'm getting at, and this is already an hour into it, and I appreciate you for listening if you're still listening to this point. But I had to learn how to fucking cope. Because one of the things that, especially with African American males, we're taught not to fucking cry at all. We're not taught to cry at all. So you're supposed to go on, you're supposed to live through whatever we're going through and just say, fuck it, man. Like, you know, we're just going to thug it out and we're going to keep moving. But this time period, which I'm describing, which you could say 1998 to 2017, or if you want to talk about the time that we got evicted the first time, which was 2004 to 2017, I dealt with a lot of emotional trauma, and I did not know how to deal with it. But the one thing I do know is I'm not the only one, and the one thing that I had to learn was, yes, I was a victim, but I had to stop acting like the victim and address what the fuck is going on with me, because I'm not going to be a better person. And my wife is going to kill me for saying this, but I feel like it needs to be said. We were supposed to date in January of 2017. And she curved me. And her curving me was the reason why I'm talking about. I was not who she needed to be with at that time. I was not who I need, because at that point, I was a destructive person. And I felt like, looking at it now, I wanted her to save me by giving me love. But in the sense of things, she couldn't do that for me, because nobody could. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Just give me 1 second. This is being recorded live. Sorry about that. But one of the things that I could say is I was not ready for my wife at that point. But by her hanging around, it gave me something to work on, because I always kept her in the back of my mind. So I started to go to meet with a psychologist, and my life really turned around. But I still had to do the work, because I still go through these things where I go through depression, I go through my little phases. I have been suicidal before. I have thought about just saying fuck my life and doing all this and that. But I had to learn how to deal with the fact that I am who I am. Because one of the things that they also tell us, oh man, money gonna fix everything. I don't know how many times I got my student refund, or I got my refund check, or I got paid and I had $1,000 in my bank account and I felt sad as hell. Sex don't do it for you. Drugs don't do it for you. You have to learn how to cope positively. And the reason why I bring up the holidays is the simple fact that at the end of the day, I used to be so depressed on the holidays. I do have to thank Darche and my cousin Candace, and even my cousin Erica, for letting me come to their house on Christmas in Zelita. But I put on a fake ass smile every time I went to the house. One year I went to my friend's house, Lee, for Thanksgiving, and I put on a smile, but I was depressed as fuck. Because, and I'm just being brutally honest. When I used to be around my friend Lee, I was jealous as hell. Why? Because he had a perfect family to me, and I didn't have none of that. And it's not my mom's fault. They have so much unconditional love for each other, and I know that I see everything on the surface. But at the end of the day, I wanted what they had. Because for me, like, waking up on Christmas was just another day, you know. So everybody's want to call me right now. Just give me 1 second. I do apologize. But yes, like, everybody and their mama, like, when I seen everybody do specific things, um, just like I said, I just felt like I was never happy. Even seeing my little cousin, like being at my cousin house, Darshay, and seeing him and his girlfriend unwrap gifts for their kids or their child, it was a depressing feeling. Not because I wasn't getting gifts, because I wasn't happy, and I felt like it was just going over there just to basically just because it was the holidays. So what I'm getting at, guys, is I told you my story, and I know a lot of people have similar stories. And the reason why you have to go get help, because that's the first step that you can do. It's not the solution, but it's part of the solution. And we go through a lot of things in life that affects us because we all have traumatic experiences. Because I didn't even mention that I've been molested twice. I don't have a great relationship with my dad. There's been a lot of other things that I didn't even talk about in this situation. I've been jumped twice, almost died 2 times from drowning. Like, those are traumatic experiences that I didn't even bring up. So a part of me opening up and talking about myself, because I do understand that these are the holidays, and I know I know y'all want to hear other stuff, and I got other content coming, but I do want to talk about that because what's common from me with everybody else is the fact that everybody knows how to hide things. Robin Williams was one of the funniest people to a lot of people. He killed himself. I don't have the suicide prevention number, but if you feel in any type of way, or you think about, if you're having like ill will thoughts, or you're just having bad thoughts in general, please call the suicide hotline. And I believe that if you are struggling with anything and you're coping in the wrong way, please reach out to somebody who is going to listen. Because I understand there's a lot of people, because I'm just going to be honest, there's a lot of people in my family that I can't even come to and tell them my business. Why? And I know I shouldn't have said that, but I'm just being honest. So I understand if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't have nobody to go to. But this time of the year is the worst time of the year to be depressed, because this is supposed to be the happiest time of the year, which is coming off of Thanksgiving. Christmas is around the corner. Everybody's feeling jolly. And this is COVID too. And that's another thing. So in closing, thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for taking time to listen. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And like this video, share this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, you know the drill. But also, if you're going through something right now, just know that there is help out there. And I know that everybody can't afford a psychologist, but there are programs that will work with you on your budget. And my final point is that I could have easily been on the other side. I could have been dead. I could have been in jail for a lot of the shit that I have endured, because there's a lot of things that I did not say just out of protection of other people. But what I'm going to say is that going to church to cope is not good enough. Drinking is not good enough. Smoking is not good enough. Fucking that bad bitch at the club is not good enough. Buying you a Ferrari is not good enough. You're never going to be happy until you love yourself internally. And I want y'all to remember that. And I'm going to say that again. You cannot love anything else until you love yourself on the inside. You have to learn how to love yourself on the inside. And it's a struggle, but it's a struggle worth going through. So I'm going to wrap this up because it's already been a little bit over. But I appreciate you for listening to this. And I encourage you to keep your mental health strong during this holiday season. And like I said, briefly, I do have other content coming out, so just be on the lookout for that. But once again, my name is Tyrone. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Stay safe, stay blessed.